Good morning and welcome to our first live event for HIM 201. So here we are in week one, and this is where we start with our live events. We are going to have two of these this term. So within the next 10 weeks, we will have two live events. So as it happens, we have two live events per live event, as it were. So we have an AM and a PM option for live event number one and an AM and PM option for event number two. So event number one happening today, August 30th, and we'll be doing event number two in October. So let's get started with where are we going with this today? Well, as you can see on here, I've placed an agenda on here. We're going to talk about welcome to HIM 201, but then we're also going to look at getting started with ICD-10. So again, as we wrap up the end of week one, maybe we're getting familiar with our coding books. Well, let's not jump ahead. Okay, so just a little bit about me. If this is your first time having me as an instructor, thank you so much for joining my class. I look forward to getting to know you. I do always enjoy reading the introductions in our discussion questions, so if you haven't already been in there, please drop in as soon as possible. I have been working at American National University just since June, though I've been teaching for several years now. I am passionate about health information management. I've been in the field for over 20 years. Have had a lot of fantastic experiences, and I love to share them with you. If you want to reach out and get a hold of me, the best way to reach me is to text me at 602-529-6002. Now you can also send me inbox messages via Canvas or even email through our ANU emails. Again, the reason that I specify so many different ways to reach out to me is I think communication is really key in being successful in these classes. And if ever you start to fall behind, if you are overwhelmed, it's okay. Just let me know. I am happy to offer grace wherever I can when it comes to assignments and due dates and whatnot. I will say there is one caveat. The discussion questions, those actually need to be done during the week in which they're assigned because they expire after the weekends, okay? So those are things that cannot be made up, but anything else I am happy to work with you on as long as we're not running out the end of the course. So we do have an actual end date to the course, but within that framework, I am happy to work with you on those assignments. So let's advance a little bit through these slides. So about 201. So started just this past weekend on August 25th, and it runs all the way into the first part of November. So November 2nd is the end of our 10 weeks together. And again, within that time, we're going to have a lot going on, a lot of MindTap assignments, coding practice, end of chapter review questions, those types of things, the test yourself. So we're going to have a lot of those, and we're also going to have a lot of discussion questions. Okay, so just jumping through the live events, of course, today, this morning, and tonight. And then we also have our next live event already scheduled for Saturday, October 19th. So again, offering an AM and a PM. So instead of a 1 hour time where we get together, I have split it out into two, and I've broken up the content. So it is slightly different content between the two different options. The reason for that is find what works for your schedule. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more flexibility having an option in the morning or in the evening. But if all else fails, absolutely check out the recording. I will be posting them by the end of the day on these live event days. So taking a look at this, in addition to office time on Tuesday mornings, if you ever have any questions, want to reach out to me, I'm happy to connect with you. Let's look at the assignments, right? So we can see right here, one of the most important things in this 201 class is the assignments. 40% of your grade comes from assignments. So those assignments, again, are going to be those activities in MindTap. They're going to be coding practice, end of chapter review questions, any quizzes. But then you can also see that the tests/quizzes are 20%. Those are actually the things that say test yourself, okay? So those are the tests. And then, of course, final assessment. So 25% of your grade for the whole class comes in that final week 10 when you have that final assessment. So again, as you go through the course, one of the most important things is to keep up on those assignments. 40% of your grade, that's pretty heavy. And also, there's a lot of them. So even though they're 10 points, 15 points, whatever it might be, as I start putting in zero placeholders, it can add up. So totally understand if you find yourself in a position where you can't complete everything in the week that it's due, and that is fine, but it's very important to put together a plan so that you make sure that you catch up as soon as possible. So as those due dates come and go, I actually put in a zero placeholder, and what that means is that zero is your grade until you replace it with something else, right? So when you do the assignment, the grade will be updated to be whatever it is that you earned. And really anything is better than a 0. But again, the weight of those zeros is just a little bit of motivation to recognize, you know what, I need to get on it because maybe I'm not happy with the grade that I have. Okay, so if you have any questions related to that, this is a snippet from this right here actually, is a snippet from our course syllabus. So please let me know if you have any questions on that. Okay, so also, like I said, when that introduction slide where I give you all the different ways to contact me, I feel it's very important. Reach out and always communicate. Please do not, as you get overwhelmed, you might be behind, maybe feeling guilty about not making progress, please do not hide out, okay? Please let me know. Otherwise, I will be checking in on you, I guess doing well checks to make sure, like, how is everything going? I haven't seen you online. I haven't heard from you. So just go ahead and reach out to me. You don't have to tell me why you're behind. It's okay, unless there's something I can help you with, then that's important, okay? But if you just say, you know what, I'm running behind this week, I'm not gonna be able to turn these in, I'm gonna do it on Tuesday or whatever, please just let me know and I'm happy to work with you on that, okay? So in this class specifically, no late penalties for those submissions. However, I'm going to be following up with you regularly to make sure that those are getting done, because again, we have a lot of assignments in this class and those zeros will add up quickly. So bottom line, please do not hide out from me. I will find you. I'm just kidding. I will be looking for you to identify how I can help you, how I can get you going. We want to make sure that you stay with the course, that you don't find yourself in week 8, 9, 10 and have a lot of things to make up. Okay, also very important, participate in the weekly discussion forum. Again, that is only active in the week in which that question is made. So please be sure that you jump in there. You get that 10 points. 10 points is 10 points. So please jump in there and get those. And then again, make a realistic plan and pace yourself. It's so important to remember why you're even doing this. There's always going to be competing priorities in life, whether things that demand your attention or things that just entertain you away from where you should be. Always remember why you're doing this, and that's going to help you in those times when you're trying to make those decisions on how you're going to spend your time, but again, that realistic plan. So if you look at, for example, here's our week 1 announcement. Within our week 1 announcement, we can see we have, that's quite a few. What is that? 6 or 7 different things. Actually, I think it's 6 mind tap exercises that we need to do this week. Pace yourself. Create a plan for this week. For this week, I'm going to spend this much time this day, and then I'm going to work on this day. And it's okay if your plan is sidetracked a little bit. Just go ahead and recover from it. Then maybe the next plan you put together, you know what? I have to do a little bit of catch up. So now I'm going to, again, realistic plan. Okay. So jumping over to this, what do we have? Well, what's most important as we start the class? One of the things that I tend to get a lot of questions on is the books, right? When are we going to receive the books? Well, you should receive the books by the end of week 1. So here we are kind of standing at the end of week 1 right now. If you have not received your book, I do want to hear from you. And I will contact the bookstore, or you can even contact the bookstore, but I don't want this to be an obstacle that keeps you from completing your work. Okay, so our week 1 and 2 objectives, this is a snippet from our class syllabus, and I've pulled out the different types of things that we're doing again as we start this course. So week 1, largely familiarizing ourselves with ICD-10, and that's what we're going to talk about in this morning's lecture. Week 2 is where we really start getting into it, where we're identifying maybe different systems, coding conventions. Specifically, I think we have listed on here as the skill HIV coding guidelines, sepsis and septic shock. So it's actually getting into the coding next week. But this week is a little bit more on wrapping up what is ICD-10 and how do we even approach coding in ICD-10. So let's kind of jump through. I have just a few slides here to support this. So one of the things that's important to consider is that in October 2015, there was a dramatic shift in the coding environment in healthcare in general. And that's where we went from ICD-9 to ICD-10. Now, worldwide, ICD-10 had been utilized for many years. In fact, they're even beyond that now, but the United States is slow to follow. Kind of think about why we might be slow to follow. Reimbursement, okay? So nobody else has their coding system so tied to reimbursement as we do. They're using their coding systems for research and those types of things. However, with ours being tied to reimbursement, there are a whole lot of stakeholders in there and a lot of reason to kind of hold back on making the change. So October 2015, it finally happened, but you're gonna find if you're in the field of coding that there's a lot of people that were pre-10, right? So what are some of the things when they would reference back to ICD-9, because you will still hear it? Well, some of the difference between 9 and 10, there's no longer E codes. These are actually, or V codes. They're actually beginning with different types of letters now. So E codes were things like identified places where things could have happened. V codes would be status post, or would be just something to describe something in a different way. So now instead of E codes, these things all begin with V, W, X, or Y, and then of course the V codes starting with letter Z. So that sounds like an alphabet soup right now, but again, as you get into ICD-10, you become familiar with the tabular, you become familiar with the different systems, you're gonna get a lot more exposure to this. So again, some of the characteristics of ICD-10, 68,000 codes. Now you'll be surprised, people that spend years doing coding, they actually start to memorize codes. By no means 68,000 of them, but if you're a specialty coder and perhaps you always code neurology, or you always code, I don't know, moms and babies, right? You're gonna have a lot of those codes already memorized. In fact, you can probably ask someone already, like for example, I still remember from my ICD-9, if it was a regular delivery, it was a 650. Okay, so you're always gonna remember certain things. Diabetes, 250, and then the additional digits, well, that just depended on what type of diabetes. Those types of things, you're gonna find that in ICD-10 as well, but again, I have never encountered anybody that had memorized 68,000 of them. So you can see on here some of the characteristics of ICD-10 from 3 to 7 character codes, the 7-digit extensions. The second character is always numeric. So it's gonna start off again with that alpha and then go to numeric. The decimal point is always after the 3rd character. And then codes in each chapter are subdivided into blocks, categories, subcategories, and codes. So again, as you get into your ICD-10 book, start to get really familiar with it, working your way through alpha, working your way through tabular, this is gonna be a lot more meaningful to you. Let's go ahead and jump on to the next one. Why in the world do we even use ICD? Again, this is kind of a week 1 question, but it is important to understand the purpose. So like I said, in the United States, we do tend to use it for reimbursement. We also use it for research. But outside of the United States, it is primarily used for collecting data, for studying morbidity and mortality statistics, for looking at outcomes, those types of things. So here we actually have a definition as the purpose of the ICD, and WHO, which is the World Health Organization sponsorship, is to promote international comparability in the collection, classification, processing, and presentation of morbidity and mortality statistics. So basically, research. Okay, so when you consider ICD-10 or ICD really 9 even, why is that a reflection of society? Kind of think about that. Where do the codes come from? How do changes in ICD really reflect what's going on in society? And I'll do just dramatic pause here for a second. Why do you think that's a reflection of society? Well, if you think about it, when the changes come up, and they come up annually, they are reflecting things that are now an issue in our society that maybe they weren't an issue before. Meaning if we have new technology, I guess, on which people can injure themselves, if we have new procedures that we're doing that we were not previously doing, those are gonna be reflected in ICD. For example, if you think about it, maybe years ago, there wouldn't have been any sort of injuries related to cell phones, right? But it could be something that you would see now, and there's probably codes for it. You could have had years ago where maybe it was more common for someone to hurt themselves doing, oh my goodness, some sort of manual labor or something that we just don't even do today. And those will have likely been retired because it's not something that's actually utilized. So ICD is a reflection of society in the fact that we have an evolution of our diseases. We have an evolution of, I guess, mechanisms to injure ourselves. Whatever those might be, you will see them actually manifested in ICD. Okay, so looking at this, so how to select an ICD-10 diagnosis code, well, I'll go into that in more detail in tonight's live event number 1. But just kind of some first steps looking through this. First thing it's important to do is to identify the diagnosis to be coded based on documentation. So documentation is really the biggest component of this. What the physician documents, what the diagnostic results tell you. So just kind of looking at this, you'll see that there's some differences between outpatient coding and inpatient coding. So outpatient coding, identify the main reason for services provided. So you're looking at why did the patient present? What was the main reason for their presentation? You don't code things that are uncertain. It needs to be a confirmed diagnosis. And then it says, however, if it is uncertain, you can code the signs and symptoms. So if you suspect it's something, you're not going to code that suspected something. You're going to code the signs and symptoms because those are confirmed. Okay, now when it comes to inpatient coding, a little bit different. So the principal diagnosis, the main reason for services, similar to outpatient. Coding conventions and general and chapter-specific guidelines take precedence. So that's where it's very important as you're going through coding, you're looking in the alpha, you're reading those notations, those instructions, things that are leading you on to check out another code, to look for things that should be excluded, those types of things. Signs or symptoms integral to disease process should not be coded when that diagnosis is present. So for example, if someone has the flu and you're coding the flu, you're not also going to code a fever and whatever else goes out with the flu, okay? So if it is included, you don't code the signs and symptoms. You code the actual diagnosis. This is a big difference between inpatient and outpatient. When a diagnosis is uncertain, you can code that uncertain diagnosis as if it exists. Now, why would you do that? Because you're actually addressing it. You are providing services based on that. Okay, so looking at just some questions that have to do with ICD-10, maybe some of this information that we just thought about, go ahead. Which of the following statements about ICD-10-CM are true? What do you think? Is it A, all codes are 7 characters long? B, there are 90,000 codes? C, the second character is always numeric? Or D, the placeholder character is Z? What do you think is true? How far have you made it in your reading? And how much did you pick up when we were talking about the different types of codes? Okay, so just to kind of give you a hint, it's not A. So all codes are 7 characters long. Well, earlier in the discussion of characteristics of ICD-10, we said there are 3 to 7. So there are over 90,000 codes. Not quite. There's a lot though. There's over 68,000. The second character is always numeric. Yes. We're going to start with an alpha, and then it's going to go to numeric. And the placeholder character is a Z? No, it is actually an X. Okay, let's try this next one. So for outpatient coding, when should signs and symptoms be coded? A, when the provider describes them, or I'm sorry, when the patient describes them to the provider. B, when the patient has never had them before. C, when the diagnosis is uncertain as indicated in the medical record. Or D, when a confirmed diagnosis is stated in the medical record. Think about this one for a second. When should signs and symptoms be coded? All right, so hopefully you remember this one since we just talked about this. This will be where we're comparing inpatient and outpatient. And in the outpatient environment, you code signs and symptoms when the diagnosis is uncertain. Okay, so if you don't have a confirmed diagnosis in the outpatient setting, you code the sign and symptoms. Okay, what about this final one? What is a block in ICD-10-CM? So this is kind of looking at the formatting and the makeup of the ICD-10 book. What is a block? Is it a contiguous range of codes within a chapter whose instructional notes apply to all codes within that block? Is it a 3-character category that has no further subdivision? A group of 7-character codes that begin with the same 3 characters? Or the final level of subdivision in the tabular list? This one is letter A. This is a range of codes within a chapter whose instructional notes apply to everything within that block. Okay, so as you work through testing out all those different codes, and like I said, you get familiar with them, they're going to change them on you. Okay, so when it comes to ICD-10, CM, and PCS, the changes occur every October 1st. Now, it doesn't mean everything changes, but that's when they choose to add codes, delete codes, maybe make changes, update, could be guidelines, different things like that. So they do it every October 1st. Any thoughts on why it would be October 1st and not January 1st? Well, it's because it's the federal government that is doing this. So it comes out, it's noted in the Federal Register, and the federal year runs October 1st through September 30th. So it's on their calendar. CPT, for example, is actually January 1st and forward, and that's because it doesn't follow the federal calendar. So why is it important to use updated coding books? What might be the consequences to not? Well, accurate coding. That is a huge component. It's our responsibility as HIM professionals and coders to make sure that we have that updated material, that we are not putting ourselves in jeopardy of putting out inaccurate claims. Did you know that by using outdated coding books or potentially using old codes, you could actually be committing not necessarily fraud, but part of the fraud, waste, and abuse category, right? So fraud, of course, is intentional, intentionally maybe billing inaccurate codes, but bad practice can also fall into maybe abuse or waste situation, okay? So either way, very important to make sure that you have the most current coding information to make sure that you're doing the most accurate coding. Okay, and just something a little bit fun when it comes to ICD-10 before we wrap up. See what you can go find in terms of silly ICD-10 codes. Even add this to any introductions that you might have. But what are some of the most interesting ICD-10 codes that you've seen? I've listed just a couple here, and of course some laughing faces. So we have things like burn due to water skis on fire. There had to have been a reason that this was created. Spacecraft collision, injury an occupant. Prolonged stay in a weightless environment. Problems in relationship with in-laws. These are actual ICD-10 codes. Pecked by a turkey and walked into a lamppost. That's not all of them. As you can see, I have a few more links up here. Of course, we have 18 silly ICD-10 codes. So you see here, bitten by a cow, struck by a macaw. I mean, obviously, I'm actually kind of curious if anybody were to come across these. I'm dying to know what the scenario was that resulted in that injury. And then here we have top 10 hilarious codes in ICD-10. This one posted, these include injured while sleeping or injured at an opera house. Walked into a lamppost. Those are some of the ones that we had on the other slide. Sucked into a jet engine. Some of these might be very infrequently used, but absolutely there was something that had occurred that cited a need for these types of things. So take a look around. You may not readily come across those in such a nice format as looking for a blog post or an entry, but as a little bit of fun, see if you can find some of the things. Could you code pecked by a turkey? I haven't tried it. See where it takes you. Okay, so gonna go ahead and wrap up. So on this one, just a reminder, I have open office time on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. That is also 6 a.m. Pacific. So if you're able to, you have any questions, you want to send me a message, you want to connect, please let me know. And then also just a reminder as we wrap up week 1, here are your to-dos for this week. So we have, of course, the discussion board, which is only open during this week. So please get in there, make your post and your replies so you can get those full 10 points. And then we have quite a few opportunities to get used to MindTap. So we have chapter 1, chapter review and test results, or test yourself. Chapter 2, chapter review and test yourself. And chapter 3, chapter review and test yourself. On that note, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. If you're not able to make it this morning or to watch this recording, please come this evening. Check out the event, check out the recording, and have a fantastic long weekend, everyone.